As the author of Jugalbandi, the BJP Before Modi, I think the obvious question in this moment when Prime Minister Modi seems to be literally the most powerful Prime Minister that I can remember, because I wasn't born in the Indira Gandhi era and one only reads of that. The most obvious question would be, what is the difference in the BJP before and after Modi?
So the intuitive argument which your listeners already know is that the style of functioning is very different, right? One or two people call the shots in this government. That wasn't the case in the BJP before Modi. But the reason it wasn't the case wasn't just because there was some deeply held belief and consensus. The heart of the issue was that no single person in the BJP, including Vajpayee, really towered above everybody else. Certainly not Advani. And even Vajpayee, he was definitely more popular than the BJP, but he didn't have Modi level popularity. The other thing about Vajpayee was that he wasn't a conventional mass politician in that he couldn't really win a state. And Vajpayee really comes to his own as a national figure after his resignation speech in 1996, which is the first televised speech in Parliament. So yes, there is this difference in, one was a more consensus style BJP, the other is a BJP in which one or two people kind of make the final decision, even though the inputs come from everybody else. But a lot of it is because there's a general popularity imbalance between Modi and everyone else in the BJP. The second counterintuitive point, Barkha, is that in my opinion at least, the ideology is not that dissimilar from each other.
Really? That's interesting.
That's the counterintuitive point. So there's this idea that, there's this joke, Barkha, that, yesterday's conservatives are today's liberals, right?
Yeah.
So those who, used to say that, Advani was, hardliner number one, now suddenly that he's got the Bharat Ratna, the opposition kind of make him out to be this, soft line, moderate voice compared to the hardline Modi.
Yeah.
And as it will be in the decades to come.
Yeah.
But really, Vajpayee, Advani, Narendra Modi had the same view of India. It is the Hindutva view. The circumstances were different. The Nehruvian ideology, the Congress party dominated for much of Vajpayee and Advani's career. They had to play on back foot.
One of the things you argued in your book, or have argued in your book, is that Vajpayee and Advani were still, in a way, operating within what you call the Nehruvian consensus. And the difference might be that Prime Minister Modi has broken the Nehruvian consensus. What is this Nehruvian consensus?
So the Nehruvian consensus, Barkha, at least the way I define it, has three components to it. Firstly, it is this idea on secularism, which is Nehru and Nehruvianism had a particular worry that a Hindu majority country should not become a Hindu majority state. So there was no worry in the 50s and 60s that India would adopt Sharia law. It's out of the question. Right. So that wasn't the worry.
Right.
But there was a real worry. Nehru felt that, what is happening now would happen in the 50s. He opposed it entirely, which is why he did not go for the inauguration of Somnath. He didn't do it, right? He wanted to keep that line. Now the BJP interprets this as the anti-Hindu view of Nehru. That's not entirely true. I don't think that's fair. But certainly Nehru had this particular worry of Hinduism taking control of the state. So that's the Nehruvian consensus when it came to secularism. That there was also a Nehruvian consensus when it came to development, which is that traditional Indian society is unable to develop India. Do not trust the village, do not trust the villager, don't trust the local baniya, trust the joint secretary in order to bring about change in India. Now, in this, Nehru had similar views to Mao, to Stalin, to other third world modernizers who wanted in 20-30 years to develop with the speed that it took England 500 years to develop. And their answer is that our traditional societies can't do it. So this the BJP interprets to be Nehru's contempt for traditional society, right?
When you say that there is no, in your opinion, no big ideological difference between the BJP before and after Modi, right? That's effectively the argument you're making. There are any number of people who would argue that there was a consensus building approach to the BJP of Vajpayee. And that consensus is being disrupted, right, by the BJP of Modi. And that is the difference.
So I don't disagree on the facts. The question is why, right? So is that being disrupted because the Modi government has a different view of running, of consensus? Or is it disrupted because, Narendra Modi is simply far more popular than Vajpayee ever was within the party? He's able to win elections.
So you're saying if Vajpayee and Advani could have abrogated 370, if they could have somehow, the Mandir has come from the Supreme Court, but it is still politically seen to be Modi's moment. If they had the political clout and the popularity to do many of the things that have been done under the Modi government, they would have.
So, the counterfactual is hard, but that's where my argument is going.
Okay.
But the counterfactual is hard to say because you wear the mask long enough, Barkha, it becomes your face. So for 40, 50 years...
Or as Govindacharya said, ye to mukhota hai about
Vajpayee's but I mean it,
moderation.
But I don't mean it in that sense only. I also mean it that the BJP itself had to be on back foot, because it was operating under this Nehruvian consensus. So it had to wear the parliamentary mask, for so many decades. Then I think Advani changed, that Vajpayee changed. But that change was because of the circumstances. To put it differently, if you're playing against a fantastic bowling, team, and you have to always play on the back foot, you become Rahul Dravid. So Advani and Vajpayee became Rahul Dravid.
And Modi is Virat Kohli.
And the opposition is also much weaker. He's also much more attacking.
Yeah.
So you play attack long enough, you become Virat Kohli. You play back foot long enough, you become Rahul Dravid. So again, it's very hard in these matters to get the counterfactual exactly right. But on Article 370, for example, there was no daylight between Advani, Vajpayee, Narendra Modi, Amit Shah. There's no daylight. I mean, it's a code, and it's not just them. Since the 1950s, Hindu nationalists have been saying that this is wrong, it should be removed. Shama Prasad Mukherjee protested hugely against, the special
one
status
nation,
to Kashmir.
One flag, one constitution.
Yeah, so if anything, Barkha, Narendra Modi is a disciplined soldier of a 100-year movement. His personality is different. His style of functioning is different. But on core ideological issues, there's not 1 inch daylight between him and the RSS.
The phrase that you used in your book and that you have used more recently after the Bharat Ratna has been announced for LK Advani is Hindutva Fevicol. And I find it a fascinating phrase because it basically conveys that no matter how popular individuals may be, no matter how deep the differences may be among these individuals in the Sangh Parivar, the idea of Hindu unity will paper over the cracks, will gloss over the cracks. And that is what you see in the decision by the Modi government to give Mr. Advani this Bharat Ratna. Now, let me be contrarian and argue against that. The argument, Advani relegated, Advani basically benched, basically retired by being put on the Margdarshak Mandal. What does it actually cost the Modi government to give him a Bharat Ratna in the twilight of his life? Why is this an example of Hindutva Fevicol? You would say what?
Well, I would say that Hindutva Fevicol is staying together even when you don't have power. There is the key. Right? Of course, when you have power, you can be magnanimous. So in the example you give, all the power is with Narendra Modi. And so he is, he can afford to be magnanimous. But, all the power has been with him since 2014.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But in all those years, he has not given, Advani was still a Padma Vibhushan. And why is it that he was given Bharat Ratna just a few days after Karpuri Thakur has been given Bharat Ratna? It is to recognize the two genies that I would say came out of the bottle in 1990, which is Mandal and Mandir. Yeah. Right? And these are the two powerful forces of India that redefined India, that have brought Modi to power. It's part of a larger ideological worldview. And in order to further this ideological worldview, Narendra Modi has not allowed his personal ego to come in the middle of it. That is the point. That this is not a petty act. It is an act of generosity. And it is even more magnanimous, or as magnanimous an act of generosity was around October, November 1995, when Advani could have been the prime ministerial candidate of the BJP, could well have been the first prime minister, BJP prime minister in India. I don't know if the allies would have liked it. But he understood that it wouldn't have been a stable coalition, and he, going against the RSS view on the matter, supports Vajpayee. Vajpayee becomes the PM candidate. That again is an example of Hindutva Fevicol. So this particular decision of Modi is a continuation of a long stream which defines Hindu nationalism, where unity and sacrifice is higher than individual self-interest.
So Mandal and Kamandal is a sort of embrace by the BJP in recent years, but Mandal was not the BJP's brainchild, it was VP Singh's brainchild. One of the arguments that you make is that Advani is not given enough credit for not opposing the politics of Mandal. But where does Mandal fit in with the idea of Hindu unity? Because you see, it is caste and caste politics that stratifies the consolidated Hindu identity, right?
You're absolutely right. And so the next step to the fact that caste defines Hindu unity is that caste should not become a political issue among Hindus, right? Now, cut to August 1990. VP Singh has just announced the Mandal Commission. So the Mandal Commission itself is a culmination of backward caste quotas in state politics in North India, which began with Karpuri Thakur, which itself is a continuation of backward caste quotas in South India, which began in the 50s and 60s itself, right? So there's a long history which culminates in Mandal. Now, Advani realizes very clearly that the urban upper caste base of the BJP is protesting against Mandal. They're setting themselves on fire. You would remember them, I think, as a student.
I also remember, without understanding anything about caste, being a totally stereotypical, deracinated, Delhi liberal, marching against Mandal. Partly because as a young college student, I wanted something to march against and it was exciting. Partly because in my privileged understanding of caste, to deny caste was the progressive position. It's journalism that informed me otherwise. So, I mean, I just remember Mandal so well, but I think that we've never really politically, even today, we are debating how far do you go with this politics of Mandal. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm very curious to understand how this stratification, let's say OBC politics, reservation politics, is in synchronicity with the idea of a consolidated Hindu vote.
So it's not obvious. That's the first point. It was not obvious to Advani in August 1990 that Mandal comes. To give you an example, it's not just you who marched against Mandal. Rajiv Gandhi Congress Party opposed the Mandal Commission, saying that actually on progressive grounds that you're bringing caste into politics, right? Advani's genius, it's underappreciated genius, that against the the core original base of the BJP, he understood that if the BJP was only an upper caste North Indian party, it would, forget representing Hindus, it would not win elections, it would be confined to 7% of the vote share, right? And it is his genius that he supports the Mandal Commission, and he moves the BJP to support the Mandal Commission.
To in some ways the OBC party that it is today.
To the OBC party that it is today, and voters respond. So early opinion polls, early surveys saying that the jump of the BJP from its 7% vote share, which is historical since the 1950s, to about 20-21%, which happens under Mandir, is not just because of the Ayodhya movement, it's also because the BJP understood that you have to unite these two segments of Hindu population to come together, but change the conversation into Mandir. So I think that's an underappreciated part of what Advani did. And the natural culmination of that is an OBC Prime Minister who gets a large percentage of the OBC, especially EBC vote. So I think that understanding was counterintuitive at that time. I mean, most BJP leaders would prefer marching with you against Mandal in 1990.
And to be clear, I don't believe that my position was a well-informed position.
Absolutely,
it was a young collegiate understanding of politics, very different from my politics today. But to come back to this idea of Hindutva Fevicol, the Hindu is not a monolith.
Yes.
Hinduism is not a codified religion. There is no one book that defines or describes who is Hindu. It has been famously said and argued that even atheists have a place within Hinduism. Justice J.S. Verma of the Supreme Court said Hinduism is a way of life, right? That idea of Hinduism and Hindutva are not always on the same page. So when you look at the Mandir movement, what do you see? Because you have said that there is no daylight between Vajpayee, Advani, Modi and Shah on key issues. The Mandir movement was seen to be, by many critics of the government, as a announcement of the Hindu rashtra. But I was reading some of your old writings, and in 2020, you said, we are already living in the Hindu rashtra. Explain what you meant then and whether anything has shifted today in 2024.
So I want to answer this question in two parts. Sorry, as an academic, I give long answers, so I apologize for that.
The whole idea of this conversation is to go beyond bite-sized nuggets. So
no, but I am sorry for that. But so let's try to sort of get at the first question you asked, which is the Hinduism versus Hindutva.
Yeah.
The description that you just gave of Hinduism is not just accurate. It is exactly what Hindu nationalists believe Hinduism is. The difference is you celebrate it, right? But for Hindu nationalists like Savarkar, this sort of enormous diversity, lack of a code was the ideological lack of unity that ensured that Hindus were praised for invaders again and again and again, right? In the 20th century, the idea of invaders is replaced by the idea of elections. Right? So Hindus lack unity. That's why they lose on the battlefield, in the third battle of Panipat. In the 20th century, Hindus lack unity unlike Muslims. That's why they lose in the electoral field. Right? The entire 100-year project of Hindu nationalism, what we call Hindutva, is the creation of a modern Hindu vote bank. And it is precisely because traditional Hinduism lacks this ability that you need a vehicle like, otherwise if the traditional Hinduism can convert easily to Hindutva, what do you need the RSS for? What do you need Savarkar for?
Sorry to interrupt you, but Arun Jaitley used to, I think, say that it's about converting the cultural Hindu into a political Hindu.
That's right. Or rather, cultural Hindus because into a political Hindu.
Yeah.
But in order to convert them to a political Hindu, you need an underlying common cultural base, right? Now, the opinion is divided whether in doing this, Hindutva has changed Hinduism so much that it's not Hinduism anymore. I would buy that, right? I think it's a modernist response. Just like other religions, if you look at the Buddhism of, Dharampala in Sri Lanka, if you look at political Islam of Sayyid Qutb, if you look at the Christianity of the Christian Democrats in Europe, of course they are changing religion a little bit when it's entering politics. So Hindutva does the same thing. But it would be too much to say that the political incarnation of Hinduism has nothing to do with Hinduism. That's not, that's too much of a stretch. And whatever your and my view of the subject, millions of Hindus in India see the vehicle of their religious expression to be the BJP. They don't think Hindutva and Hinduism is different. The Ram Mandir movement is a Hindutva project. From 1,000 years from now, it will be seen as a Hindu project.
So explain to me, a lot to ask on that. Indira Gandhi is actually the first to Hinduize mainstream politics, right? And if you read Neerja Chaudhary's excellent book, she actually talks about how Indira Gandhi enjoyed a very good relationship with the RSS. And the RSS at moments preferred her to Vajpayee. And Indira Gandhi is visibly sort of the temple runs that today opposition politicians are scrambling to do. Indira Gandhi did them very organically, and she understood that language. Why then does the Hindu voter, as has been shaped and consolidated by the BJP today, look at the BJP as the vehicle and not the Congress of Indira? Is it because the Congress stopped being the Congress of Indira? Or what happened?
So, again, it's a long answer. But the way I see it in my book, Indira Gandhi is not Hinduizing India. She's the first politician smart enough to respond to a Hinduizing India. Right? In other words, so of course there's a top-down element of kind of shaping a Hindu vote bank. But in the early 80s, Barkha, a nascent Hindu vote bank is being created for ground-up reasons. And these are three ground-up reasons. One is there's just economic anxiety. Right? In that period, the economy is going to tank. We see when it comes to Trump also that when the economy goes down, the poor tend to vote on the basis of their religion and ethnicity rather than on their class. Second is the extension of backward caste reservations in North India by Karpuri Thakur, etc. What would culminate a decade later in the Mandal movement is creating anxiety among upper caste Hindus. All this in the early 80s. And third is the Khalistan movement is killing Hindus of all castes and communities. They are not only targeting upper caste Hindus. So in North India, that's also creating this anxiety, right? There is this bottom-up anxiety. Indira Gandhi sees this with remarkable clarity. right? And she's the first retail politician to now start visiting temples. I think in 82 or 83, there were these Jammu and Kashmir state elections where she explicitly played the religion card, saying that I will protect you from the Muslim National Conference, right? So she's a better, in that sense, she's a better grassroots politician than the BJP was at that time. So in that sense, she's able to see trends the way Modi is able to see, and the way Vajpayee and Advani were not quite able to see so clearly. So that's the first point, that Hindu nationalism, of course, it was nurtured by the RSS, etc., but there's also a ground up element to it that we should appreciate, right? The second question you're asking is that, okay, if especially Rajiv, but even Indira Gandhi, they were the first to understand the Hindu vote bank. Why did the vote go to the BJP eventually? That's a complex question, right? The design of the Congress party is that it has to be everything to everybody. So while it's a big tent, right? That's its DNA. There's nothing you can do about it. So all that it's doing to get the Hindu vote bank in the 1980s, it's also trying to get to the Muslim vote bank, right? So similarly, you have the Shah Bano judgment.
That's right.
Similarly, you have the banning of Salman Rushdie's satanic verses, right? That's not because the Congress is a Muslim party or Hindu party. It wants in an ideal world to be a Hindu and a Muslim party. Right. Yeah. But in a highly fragmented marketplace, you see this from the corporate world also. You can't be everything to everybody, right? And the BJP understands that it doesn't have the baggage of also having to appeal to Muslims. It can have the single message of Hinduism. Congress's DNA can never afford that, which is why even today it feels like the Congress is schizophrenic. But that's the design of the Congress that Gandhi created. That 100 years from now has not changed. It's the big tent party of Indian nationalism.